Hi everyone, how you doing? Welcome to our LinkedIn Live. Some of you might be sick and tired of seeing the posts I've been putting up the last couple of weeks, but thank you for joining us. We're gonna have a really interesting conversation today, thought-provoking, and also direct. I'm Rad Dockery here at the Adaptivist Group, and have my colleagues here from Adaptivists, from GitLab, and from AWS. So we're gonna have a great conversation about AI's role in development. Very straightforward conversation, so let's get into it. Let me first bring up question number one. Let's get going on this. By the way, if you have questions, please submit questions. We'll answer them towards the end. No question is too silly. No question is too strange, because this is a new world. We're all trying to figure it out together. But we have some very specific things we're going to talk about today, and hopefully get some value from here. So first, I want to call on my colleague here from AWS, Ron. And Ron, good to see you, my friend.
Hello. Hi, Rad. Good to be here.
We've got to know each other a lot over the last couple of months, working a lot on Q as well. And I believe two of our other colleagues will talk about that very soon as well. So Ron, let me start off by asking you this question. Just get this thing started here. What does effective AI rollout actually look like in the world that you live in the world that you're seeing out there?
Yeah. So just for an introduction, I'm actually the worldwide partner lead at AWS, in charge of Amazon Q Developer. So I sit on our generative AI team, and I've been working with the GitLab team to bring Q Developer and the Duo product to market, and our partners at Adaptivist to help to get it in the hands of customers. And when we think about what an effective AI rollout actually looks like from our perspective, we really need to focus on the personas. We're going after the developer here. The success of tools like GitLab Duo with Q depend entirely on the developers that are going to use them day to day. Not really the CTO or the VP of engineering, but the people with the hands on keyboards, wrestling with code reviews, dealing with security vulnerabilities, and trying to modernize those legacy applications. So these people, the developers, I used to be one of them. I came from a software engineering background, right? We need to experience the aha moment that when we realize it's not just another tool being forced on us. And we're fickle people. We don't want to use tools unless they really provide us value in our day-to-day kind of operations during software development. And you need to show them. It genuinely makes their life better. And so the way to get the developers' attention is to actually sit down with them, show them the tangible benefits. And every software firm, engineering firm, pipeline is a little different. There aren't two that we've seen that are exactly the same. And so your measure of success is going to be different depending on your engineering team. Some people look at speed to market. Some people look at the number of commits. Some people look at the number of security vulnerabilities you might have created or thwarted as a result of developing applications. But the key here is you need to make it easy for the developers to try and get their hands on it. No complex setup, no really big approval process, just get in and use it. And then once they begin to use it, really what we've seen is kind of a 90-day proof of value where you define kind of measurable success. And then you connect the dots between what the developers are doing and those business outcomes, showing that you really are getting 20 to 50% speed improvement or reduction in time to generate code documentations and unit tests. So tying what the developer is doing with those business outcomes.
Fantastic. And my apologies, everyone. I'm going to introduce my other two colleagues here on this distinguished panel we have today. Muna Mohammed from GitLab.
Hi, thank you, Rad. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Muna Mohammed, and I'm the Ecosystem Solutions Architect at GitLab. I work with partners across Europe, such as Adaptivist and also AWS. So yeah, thank you, everyone, for having me here today.
Thank you. And let me also introduce Neil Riley from the Adaptivist Group and General Manager of Scalable. Neil.
Hey, Rad. Always good to see you. It's very nice to meet you. Very nice to be here, everyone. As Rad mentioned, my name is Neil Riley. I'm the general manager for one of our Adaptivist Group businesses called Salable. Likewise, I'm part of the innovation team working on our AI services. And so we work quite closely with our friends at GitLab and our friends at AWS on the ground with customers going through transformation work across their dev experience and DevOps work. And recently, of course, their experience rolling out AI across their businesses.
Fantastic. So really pleasure to be on here with the three of you. The three of you have brought so much and taught me so much over the last years. We've learned together and had some pain together trying to figure out what we're trying to do in this world of AI and deliver value to our customers and to ourselves internally as well. Well, Neil, since you were the last part of the intro, the next question goes to you. What are we seeing in the industry when it comes to AI rollouts? When you're working directly with customers, partners, or internally, give us a sense of what you're seeing, Neil.
I definitely want to echo what Ron's saying. I think organizations who are trying to understand what those challenges are, what those barriers are to their success, understanding what metrics they're tracking themselves against and where they're trying to improve. That's a really solid foundation that we're seeing customers adopt and then use AI capabilities and AI services platforms to go off and actually start improving some of those core numbers. As you can imagine, an organization adopting AI is not a simple task. You have to really be very clear and very focused, laser focused on the outcomes you're trying to get and understanding, what metrics you're trying to improve, how you're measuring yourself, and how you go about these things. The customers we're working with right now, and the ones that we're speaking to who are going through these AI transformations, a lot of them right now are focusing on two key areas. One of them is around cost savings. Now, often you hear the discourse in the media and other places talking about AI and its ability to take on human level work. We're not seeing organizations do that right now. In fact, quite the opposite. What most organizations are looking at is trying to understand where they are having waste, where they're having technical debt, and where they're seeing optimizations where they can, say, for instance, make better use of their AWS spend. Better use of the time in a development flow focusing engineers on higher value tasks as opposed to lower value tasks. These kinds of cost reduction elements are very easy to identify and relatively straightforward to go through a 90-day POC, as Ron mentioned, to actually get that tangible value and start kickstarting that direction of travel and that modernization work. Likewise, what we're seeing on the subject of modernization is people going through, or organizations going through and starting to identify where they have risk around their business. And risk can come in a lot of different flavors. Right now, the biggest thing that AI is helping organizations in their development pipeline, their software development lifecycle, sort of address those risks are around modernizing and bringing up to speed and bringing up to security standards those supporting services and those direct-to-customer services that their customers rely on today. So this can be everything from bumping Java versions to their correct areas and starting to handle the ramifications and the sort of repetitive actions it takes to keep those things in line, but also just scanning and doing audits of infrastructure as a whole as it stands today and starting to really shine a light on where can we be making improvements and where are some quick wins that we can put into place. What both of these approaches have in common, which I think is useful if any one of you out there who are listening today are trying to go on one of these journeys, both of them have measurable outcomes. Both of them are monetary, which is to say numeric outcomes that you can measure. You can easily see a cycle time decrease. You can easily see your AWS costs go down. You can easily see the versions and the general test coverage and things like this go up. These kinds of measurable outcomes give you a really good understanding of your inputs and outputs. And if you can understand where you're putting in that dollar in AI capabilities and how many dollars you're getting back out, for lack of a better phrase, it's very easy to sort of set that as the baseline that you're using to go off and continue down these sort of more complex engagement and these more complex solutions that AI can deliver. What I will say is those organizations who are on the forefront, those who are really pushing the boundary of what AI can do and where they can get the most out of these kinds of technologies, are the ones who are trying to find and implement agentic use cases. So use cases where we were not just dealing with AI responding to a human being's request in the form of a chat interface like ChatGPT or something like that, and just doing a one-off call and response. These agentic systems are taking much more control and much more autonomy in trying to get to an outcome that you're trying to make happen. And these agentic systems have a lot more reasoning baked into what they can do. Not every use case requires agentic AI, but those organizations who have identified those places where these agentic systems can start taking on a lot more responsibility, they're seeing multiplier effects in the response and the outcomes that they're looking for. So those are, I think, the three big areas today.
Muna, I saw you nod your head when agentic AI came up. Actually, we all did, but you had the most positive nod. Talk a bit about what made you nod, based on your role and what you do day to day. Let's talk a bit about, from your point of view, what you see.
Yeah, no, of course. Actually, I agreed with everything Neil was saying, and I wanted to just also add in that one of the biggest success stories we are noticing with on the ground is also the fact that teams, first of all, it always starts small. So teams are working end to end, kind of trying to prove their value quickly, and you need to be really intentional creating those clear metrics. And most importantly, an organization kind of needs to have the cultural buy-in, and that's, I think, really important. And with GitLab Duo and Amazon Q, you can make this real. And the reason for this is because it's embedded in your DevSecOps lifecycle. So this really makes it real. It's impactful then and there, and it's not just about coding faster, it's about shipping smarter and working a lot quicker. And another thing as well that Neil slightly mentioned, which I was nodding my head along to, is that I think teams should be looking both at qualitative, I always get the words wrong, but qualitative data, quantitative indicators, and really and truly, what I mean is the DORA metrics. Those are a really strong baseline, especially when looking at lead times, change failure rates, but also tracking, again, those adoption rates. And, utilizing and leveraging GitLab Duo with Amazon Q can really help with those internal feedbacks. AI really supports teams with that in their day-to-day workflows. And so that's why I was nodding my head. I agreed with everything Neil was saying. And I think moving towards the agentic way of working requires the cultural buy-in, but I think it's naturally going towards that direction.
Fantastic. Ron, I saw you also with that really firm head nod.
Yeah, it's great. So if I hear exactly what Neil and Muna are saying, and what Neil kind of mentioned, top of mind is really around app modernization. And this is actually something that Amazon Q can do, and it's embedded inside of the Duo product as well. So if you think about some of the day-to-day activities that a developer's doing, they're writing code, writing documentation, writing unit tests. But if you zoom out, come up a level in altitude, you'll see that that's happening across maybe dozens to hundreds of applications. And in general, right, engineers, they build things, they move on. You have applications that you might be running that are maybe HR portals, maybe simple utilities, and you kind of have this sprawl that happens over time, over a period of 5 or 10 years, where you have maybe hundreds of applications that are running, doing well for your business, but they're on maybe older legacy tech stacks, Java 7, Java 8 from 2010. And so one of the things that we found in this kind of early stages of AI and development is that we can leverage these tools to remove the drudgery of maintaining those applications. So bringing them forward in the tech stack, going from Java 8 to Java 21. And when you think about that kind of work, where you're just kind of updating syntax and doing kind of boring work as a developer, those time sink activities are really where we can see the most uplift for the use of kind of agentic AI. And what this really does is it allows you to kind of in mass, modernize applications, and then go in and tweak where you need to tweak, and spend the 5 or 10% of time that actually requires, real thoughtful development. But the rest of it's really kind of syntactic change. But I think that's an area where we have seen the most interest in our partner community, in our customer community, just because everyone has this problem. We have this legacy tech stack. We have it too at times. We have to move things forward. And so if you can kind of get that drudgery out of the way, that seems to be something that resonates with everyone across the board.
Excellent points. Really good. Now, this is a good segue. it's really good to say we're going looking in now to some more meat here on Duo and AWS. An interesting point was you both mentioned the whole concept of application modernization. I was at a conference recently, and we saw a major bank pulled me aside, someone I knew for a long time, and said, we run our main core banking system on a legacy system. We run our credit cards mainly on a legacy system, right? So I think a lot of times we forget about that. So it's so good to hear you all talk about the legacy systems and the role they play, and trying to modernize and going forward with AI and development. That's really powerful stuff that you spoke about, and I think most listeners out there could relate to that, especially those who are a bit older who can remember computing and how it was before this 15 years ago. So in saying so, let's go into some more detail here. Muna, where are people spending their AI budget? Where are you seeing organizations, departments spend their AI budget?
Yeah, great question. I think more and more we're seeing AI budgets kind of shift towards platform integrated tools, not just like dev assisted tools, but tools like GitLab Duo with Amazon Q. I think individuals everyone was utilizing particularly AI tools to help them, maybe just doing security or maybe just doing deployment. But now we're really noticing that shift where you want everything to be in one place, and so GitLab Duo with Amazon Q makes that a lot easier. So purely because it kind of spans across the planning, the code, the test, the security, the monitoring, and really the full SDLC. People have realized that the problem isn't just writing the code, it's the entire journey. And so having that agentic AI embedded in your full DevOps lifecycle, not just the IDE, is really beneficial. And I think Duo with Q is a prime example of that. It's kind of an investment on top of your CI/CD and security and cloud infrastructure. And I think also leaders in general in organizations are realizing, again, not just the code suggestion, that's not what AI is all about. It's about managing the full software development lifecycle and making sure that you're utilizing GitLab Duo that supports the planning, the merge reviews, the test generation, and then incorporating Amazon Q that lets you communicate directly with your AWS, making cloud operations faster, more accessible. We have plenty of those use cases to kind of run through that myself and Ron and Neil can talk about, and I think that's really exciting, especially for those of you that are techies in here that want to hear more about that. One of them, and Neil, Ron, feel free to also chip in and add some color to this. One of them that I really personally like is the idea to merge request, and it's really taking starting with an issue, starting with just having your ideas all written in an issue and your requirements, and turning those into a merge request ready for review. And what does this do? It really helps with that faster feature implementation cycles, reduces the time that it would take somebody to come up with the idea and then turning it into production. So it's really helping improving that developer productivity. I can see Neil and Ron also nodding along. So if you'd like to jump in at any moment and stop me, feel free to do so.
I'll jump in here a minute.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I was going to say, idea to merge request is awesome because essentially you kick off an agentic process and it comes back and says, it gets it about 98% correct, and you need to go sometimes 100% correct, and it just saves you all that drudgery of figuring out the syntax, figuring out the imports you need, and you can focus on just kind of that feature development. I think one of the understated things that Amazon Q actually does is it really allows you to operate more effectively on AWS. If you think about configuring, and AWS is this mix of development and deployment technologies deploying at scale. And the ability to kind of get access to Q that understands all of AWS services and understands 17 years of coding practices that we've had, configuring and deploying those is way, way easier. And so just, not having to deal with all the security groups and figuring out all of that and kind of the mental acuity needed for that, it can really help get things deployed much quicker in a safer, safer manner. And so if we think about like what Q does and what Q does with GitLab Duo, you have three major buckets, right? You have building or developing, you have operating, and then you have this transforming or modernizing. And I think as we talk about all the really cool features for developers that can build and do amazing things in documentation, that operations piece, that's really critical, because everyone that's building on AWS is generally deploying and operating on AWS. And so just figuring out how to do those things is actually a really, for me, was kind of that light bulb moment of, oh, wow, I don't have to be like a 15-year expert on AWS to actually leverage all of its great services at scale. Neil?
So Neil, yeah. I want to jump on that before you answer, Neil, just to link that. So we talked about the developers and some amazing features, functions that help everyday developers. Now, Neil, you sit in an interesting world. You work with developers, then you got to work with the business to make the business case. So draw that parallel between the two, Neil, as it relates to the features we mentioned to what you deal with day to day.
Well, and this is what's really interesting, because the idea to merge request use case actually is a really good one on a number of different areas. Let's see if we can break them down. One of the reasons I like idea to merge request is because you start bridging that gap between organizations who have disparate groups of different skill sets. So groups who are developing the task versus groups who are sort of identifying what work needs to happen and being responsible, owning a product, going through that kind of agile process. These two groups don't always speak the same language, and these two groups often struggle to be able to communicate with each other in the form of product requirements, these kinds of documents that turn into code. What I really love about the way that Duo and QDevelop specifically are bridging these gaps is they're making it very easy for an organization to collaborate with each other in a way that they haven't done before. And for those kinds of moments, those light bulb moments, they are really a game changer when it comes to how an organization can actually work as a unit and work as a cohesive team of teams. So that's one really good example. The other thing I'd say is, like, we were speaking to an organization recently about their rollout and their experimentation they were doing across a wide group of developers who are adopting some of these agentic systems. And they were comparing QDevelop and GitLab with some other systems and some other approaches. And what came back is the organization was saying that the success that came from QDevelop and GitLab came from the fact that we're starting from strong foundations. And in the case of GitLab, that is because GitLab in and of itself, in its software development lifecycle, in the dev experience that it gives you a really strong foundation of defining your work, having a really clear process for checking in code, having clear security standards, a lot of automation in between these steps. And from there, if you put AI into the equation, you're getting a lot more out, right? Same with AWS. QDevelop, its integration into the world of AWS is so fascinating because it gives you a wealth of access to what AWS provides you today. And it is those AWS primitives, the services that you rely on today, and let's be honest, that the world relies on to power the internet. You know, these kinds of capabilities allow you to do very, very simple maneuvers back and forth with AI and make these things come out in a much more positive way. So I would say that Mina's right. We're using people who are spending their budget right now on software development lifecycle. They are able at each one of the steps along the journey, they're able to really dig in and understand where they can be optimizing, where they can be finding, potential improvements, whatever. And they're able to go and experiment this in a continuous improvement method that follows on from the pre-AI days. Like a lot of what we do with customers today, a lot of where we're seeing clear AI strategies coming into effect and actually starting to show benefit are people focusing on the fundamentals. Munya mentioned DORA metrics. I mean, this is a huge one. One of the first engagements we will do with a customer is go in and look at, what is your maturity when it comes to how you're measuring yourself? Are you using industry standards like DORA? How are you measuring at each stage of the pipeline the value that's flowing through that pipeline? How are you handling CI/CD? What are your failure rates? There's a bunch of these kinds of just real basic stuff that if you get it right, you get to have a lot of fun with the AI stuff, right? The AI stuff now actually becomes a lot more useful. What I would say though is the idea to merge requests is a very good example of where agentic AI is also playing a role. And I like this example because it's one of the first places where if you've got your CI/CD pipelines right, if you've got your security standards right, if you're doing merge requests, if you're not allowing code to make it into main without actually going through some kind of vetting process, you kind of already have the gates in place to trust these AI systems to go as far as they need to go. Ron, I know exactly what you're saying about the 98% or the 100% coming out when some of this code is being written. A lot of that requires an organization to be smart about where is your documentation. Are you using common standards across these things? The AI that you can stick on your code base and sort of let it sort of munch through and understand your code base, it really has a much better outcome if you have that structure. And what I would say is there's a correlation we're seeing right now with the quality of someone's pipeline, the quality of someone's CI/CD process, and the overall increase in dev experience you can get by introducing AI at the right place at the right time.
And Ron, you wanted to jump onto that, and I think as you jump into that, talk about how do we know we're successful? How would our clients know? How would prospective players know that they're successful on this? And maybe Muna to latch onto that. How is this working? How are we seeing success? So let's talk about success and also some failure, because we want to be honest on this conversation. That we have a lot of great tools out here, and this Duo and Amazon Q are fantastic, but it's not just what Neil just said. You have all the right tools you want, but it's still coming to some of the quote unquote boring stuff that has to get done on the back end. So Ron, speak to that, and then Muna, please jump in.
Sure, no problem at all. And I think what Neil's touching upon is what these AI tools are. To adopt them is a grand exercise in change management, getting it in the hands of a developer or developer management and getting them to use a new tool. And this has been really difficult. If you think about when's the last time you actually learned a new piece of software or how to engage with it, it doesn't happen all that often. And what we found is that throwing something like agentic AI over the wall to a group of developers, it doesn't lead to success. There's no scenario where you just say, oh yeah, we bought the tool and now go use it. It really requires a very measured approach and really to examine what success looks like for you. And you mentioned, Muna here mentioned Dora, or the framework of which you can measure success. And if you're a small dev shop, you may not even be using this. And I mentioned this earlier, where every dev shop, every development pipeline looks a little bit different. So what you want to do before adopting these types of tools is to identify what success looks like to you. What's the most important thing? Is it speed of delivery? Is it reducing security issues? Is it overall time to market? Is it, decreasing, onboarding time for your developers? So what we have found that has the most success is a very intentional approach with a small group of developers. So you might have 50 developers, pick 2 Scrum teams of them, 5 or 10 of them, and get them to define the use cases that you're using daily. And then kind of run a proof of value with them, and run it with the language they're using. So if you're a Java shop, do it in Java. Make it relevant to the developers that are actually using it day to day, and then kind of take a look at after you do that kind of 90-day run, where did you improve? Did you improve delivery time? Did you improve speed to market? And that actually is how you tie back what the tools are doing for the developer and what the value is driving for the business. And I'll add on here, these tools are additive, right? These are net new tools that are adding on to a process. We're not yet replacing pieces of the software development lifecycle. And so you have to kind of justify the investment here. Why do this? What's the ROI? And if you simply do this, these for Amazon Q Developer, it's one of the most cost-effective AI, development solutions in market today, if not the most cost-effective. It will easily pay for itself per developer as you take that measured approach. Muna, do you have any thoughts on this, on kind of additional challenges that AI can solve, and maybe how we roll out to groups of people?
Yeah, and actually, I'd like to add some color to the actual platform overall, both AWS and GitLab, and the integration and where the value is there. So I think with Amazon Q, that it really helps with like the turning that AWS documentation, into a dialogue. You're not digging through pages, and you're basically asking and speaking to natural language and getting those guided answers. And then you're integrating this with GitLab, where of course, GitLab Duo doesn't just sit into the sidelines. It's right there within your pipelines, in your merge requests, in your tests. And so you're combining these two tools, which really helps with, the less context switching, less friction, the better adoption. And it's across your entire SDLC. And so what you're seeing is a combination of, of course, AWS, Amazon Q doing the amazing power and magic that it has, combined with Duo that just sort of helps with your AI, and it's there as like I call it best friend, right hand. If you're left-handed to help you and support you through your entire DevOps lifecycle. So it's there from the beginning all the way to the end. And again, I'm saying this word again, the agentic way of working built into your workflows. It's really, I personally find it to be very fantastic, and that really differentiates what your productivity would look like, especially within an organization. And yeah, so it just goes way past the just coding embedded into your whole SDLC. I think that may have answered your question. I hope so. I can see Neil also nodding along. So
this has been so fun. Like, I have to say, on behalf of Adaptivist, it's very interesting to be in a partnership with your two groups, right? Because we take an organization from how they're developing software, how they're thinking about building software, the transformation work and the change management work, all the way down through how they're operating things in production. And the power of your two groups together, frankly, make our job a lot easier when working with customers, right? It's the collaboration there, which I find really interesting. What I think I would say here about how measurements come out, I think, Munya, you did a really good job earlier defining, not all measurements are quantitative. A lot of these are qualitative. And I think the metaphor that we've been using with customers, which is a very easy one to sort of break into how to think about where AI systems can play a role and what kind of output, what kind of outcomes you can expect, is the one with cars. I think a car is a good metaphor. The outcome you expect for power steering, something that most of us have grown up with their whole lives, or if you've had an old car and you've been able to live in a car, experience a car without power steering, it's a whole nother ballgame, right? The outcome of power steering is a better experience for the driver. The outcome of power steering is you want to have a better time. You don't want your shoulders to hurt, right? The outcome of a self-driving car, the way you would measure the success of a self-driving car is completely different. Because the goal there is not make the experience of driving better. The goal of a self-driving car is make yourself a better passenger, make the experience of riding in a car better, right? I would say with a lot of organizations today, really getting clear about, are you trying to move a monetary or a quantitative number? Are you trying to move a number from 10 to 8? Are you trying to bring a cost down? Are you trying to increase your time to market? Are you trying to increase your capacity, your throughput? Or, and I would argue in many cases, this is a very, very viable and useful metric and a justification for purchasing and investing in Duo or QDevelop. Is your developer having a better day, right? Is their experience operating your software one where they like being in their job more, right? These kinds of things are harder to measure, these qualitative measures. But I would argue in the same way that power assisted steering helped people enjoy driving a car more, there's a whole bunch of benefits we're seeing right now that are intangible or very, a lot harder to measure, which are just around the experience of the developer day in and day out. And I would say from GitLab to AWS, when you talk about that part of the development lifecycle and where an organization spends their time and money and day-to-day operations, logging into GitLab and issuing merge requests, pushing code, whatever, I would say these two together and the combination of QDevelop and Duo really make for a more enjoyable experience. It's a much more optimized experience, which leads to some of that enjoyment. It's definitely the most cost-effective experience we've seen for a lot of the kinds of use cases, most use cases that people are going to want to take on. But it's that delightful experience end to end where AI plays the right role and no more. Right? You're putting AI into the equation exactly where it needs to be, where the humans need it to be, where the team needs it to be. And when those agents are done, their task is done, and you go back to building software the way we've always built software. So yeah, I would say, Rad, the real question around measurement is a hard one. The quantitative one we've spoken on is definitely there, but I would argue keeping the qualitative in mind, keeping the experience of those developers in mind is a really good idea.
Excellent point. I want to go to a question from LinkedIn. It directly correlates what we just talked about in the last segment. Question here from Tom. On the subject of success, how do you get buy-in from devs who might be skeptical of AI or worried that they're working with your eventual replacement? And I think we talked about this yesterday and the day before. This is I think you say AI, this question comes up. So who wants to take this one first?
Yeah, I love this one. I'll take this one. So, or at least I'd be happy to speak first. There is definitely a world where a lot of work that is done by humans today, AI can take on that work. Now, the question is always whether that is the most effective thing for a business to operate, which isn't always the case. And I would argue is rarely the case, depending on what level of complexity you're dealing with. But the capabilities that AI has right now, and even the projections that we're seeing and the way we're seeing the industry go, there is a world where human beings are involved for the foreseeable. And the reality is, like, a lot of the worry people have around AI displacing work, which it is definitely doing. There's definitely places where AI is doing quite a different displacement job. What I would say is most organizations we see today bet on one basic formula, and it's the formula that we speak with customers on. It's the way we help represent, the right way to be spending one's time and effort on AI. And it's a very simple formula, which is right now, AI on its own often is beaten by human beings when it comes to the complexity of what it takes to build, run, maintain, do work, whatever that work looks like. There are tasks that AI can take on today, which changes the economic landscape of how work is done. That is true. But human beings, by and large, are still better than most AI systems. What we are seeing today, though, is the combination of teams of humans and human beings taking on relationships with AI. So human plus AI or team plus AI, they are beating out, in many cases, AI on its own or human beings on its own. So you will hear people speak on this subject of, human plus AI will beat blah, blah, blah in these situations. What we see, and the organizations we see adopting AI right now, the ones we're working with are not seeking to replace human beings. They see the competitive landscape of the operations that they deal with, of the marketplaces they're working in, the ecosystems they work in. And in most cases, we're staying competitive is the thing people are trying to do. Human beings are absolutely in the loop, and in most cases, they're in the driver's seat. What I would say, though, is, and it's something we talked about change management earlier, a lot of this comes down to technological change, changing the shape of work. In my career alone, I've seen the iPhone moment happen. I've been involved in the growth of AWS, I would argue, is a very good example. If you're an AWS customer today, you don't have to run Metal in your server rooms anymore. And everyone's perfectly fine with that, right? That is absolutely a strategic approach people take. Do people lose operations? No. Are people no longer logging into an EC2 box and running shell commands? Absolutely not. They do that daily. The question isn't that. The question is, what can a human being with a platform really do? And any AWS customer knows that today, as well as GitLab customers. So it's that combination of bringing in that agentic element into your team, like Munya was talking about earlier, but also just human beings taking on some of those AI capabilities in the right way to be able to move faster, ship faster, be more secure, do everything that organizations really want to be able to do.
That's a great answer. Ron, some thoughts there?
Yeah, I love that. And this comes up a lot around, what are we doing with people's jobs here? Are we getting rid of software developers? And very much no. These tools are not about eliminating jobs. They're about evolving the developer's role to be more impactful and innovative. I think if there was a study in 2023 that said something to the extent of most developers spend less than 1 hour a day coding. Right. So the other 7 hours are spent kind of trying to plan or design or go to meetings. And so we want to try to free up those developers to do more impactful work. And so these tools handle some of the more repetitive things that bog developers down. And if I think about, how I would get my own teams to adopt this, where are the most kind of time consuming mundane tasks? I personally don't like writing unit tests. It's not fun. I don't, writing documentation isn't great. These things can do that. So you can actually enjoy the more kind of design and creative process of software development, where you're actually doing really cool, interesting logic versus having to do all of the other things that do a good fit and finish on a software product, which is great documentation, great what's it called? Great unit testing, great smoke testing, great security compliance. So all of that stuff is great to have, but it's not like the fun part of coding. And so we think about getting rid of some of those tedious tasks. And right now, the human's always in the loop. And even with agentic stuff, it comes back and the human has to validate if it got it right. And if you think about a complex system where there's multiple scalable services at AWS being used, it's going to take a lot of evolving from where we are today to get rid of somebody's job. They're going to be able to deploy that in scale and make sure everything's right. So what we can do though is tackle some of these initial kind of time-consuming tasks, creating confirmation templates, security scanning, handling mass migrations and modernizations, and so really taking the drudgery out of software development. And that's where there's a funny joke that one of my directors has, is that like we want AI to go do the dishes so we can go do the fun stuff, and that's how we very much view it. We can add a lot more color to this, but it's very much about keeping people employed, not about job loss, but it is about maybe giving you more than 1 hour a day back in coding.
Muna, as we know, we're about 20 minutes to go here. Talk about that, and then talk about how GitLab Duo and Amazon Q help with what Ron just talked about. Talk a bit about that and kind of tie that together. And in the world of a developer who may be worried about my job may be gone, how does this great partnership between your two organizations and the product you develop help address some of that, to help the developer have more time to do what they want to do, which is develop?
Yeah, no, of course. I think there wouldn't be AI without humans. And so that's been extensively touched upon by Neil as well as Ron. And yeah, I don't think the reason why we have such amazing AIs at the moment is because very smart humans are in the background working on this and creating this agentic and autonomous AIs to help us do our work a lot faster. And to kind of bring it in back to GitLab Duo with Amazon Q, I think the use cases around this particular technology is what brings it to life, and how a developer can leverage AI to sort of help their day-to-day tasks. For example, Java application modernizations. We spoke about app modernization, but in particularly, for example, transforming legacy Java 8 or 11, where in the past it may have taken ages, upgrading, weeks. Now utilizing Duo with Q, you are able to do this within minutes. And so just by leveraging this agentic AI. And so what does that do? It reduces the upgrade time. It really helps you focus on more meaningful tasks rather than sitting there waiting for an upgrade and figuring out what the issue is. And I think use cases like this really highlight how your job is not going anywhere. You're still needed. It's just these tools are there to help you get the workload done in your day-to-day. And that's the main message I would say to any developer watching this. And also it helps you, again, minimizing those risks, any issues, identifying those problems. It creates that clear audit trail for any of those transformations. So really identifying those use cases and leveraging AI to help you and support you in your day-to-day tasks, it's really what's impactful. And again, as I've said, this is more the micro scale. And I think Neil and Ron kind of painted the bigger picture. But from a use case point of view, that's where really the value in your day-to-day would be. Again, Duo with Q can help with many other use cases. For instance, we can also discuss the code review optimization. It's in the title. I don't need to go too much into detail around code review and how it can optimize. But again, it helps with your faster code review cycles. It helps reduce that time to deployment. And these are tools and technologies that can help your day-to-day tasks. And so just again, to reaffirm, your job is not going anywhere. You just need to leverage AI in the right way to support you in your day-to-day cases.
Hey, Muna, if I jump in here for a second,
Yeah,
I think what you mentioned around kind of what the power is with GitLab Duo and Amazon Q. So what we found during the early stages of Q development was that most of our developer audience that we're going here and introducing the tool to, they don't want additional tools. They want to use it inline in the CI/CD pipelines they're already in. And I think that's what's so powerful about this. We took all of the really cool stuff that we built with Q Developer, and we put it directly in the GitLab console. So you can just activate the commands right in line there with very little friction. There isn't a huge setup process. And so you're really getting the best of both worlds. And I think what's also interesting is if you wanted to go and use the other surface areas of Q, getting one of these licenses lets you do that. You can use Q inside of GitLab Duo, and you can use Q outside of it. And so if you're in the AWS console, you can activate the license there and use it, or use it in the command line in addition to the CI/CD pipeline. So this integration is the only one of its kind that we have currently, and we're actually really excited to see where this goes. We think this is going to be a huge motion for the GitLab customers to adopt, because it's just natural. We're not trying to make you learn an entirely new system. It's there. You just activate the commands and go.
Neil, I think you had a couple of more points you want to add, and try to tie that into. We got about 10 minutes to go, so try to tie it into what does the future look like now.
Yeah, absolutely.
We all the answer will be billionaires tomorrow, but let's pretend we're going to be billionaires tomorrow.
One might hope. One might hope. I'm going to tie this in and tell a story about the future by telling you about the past. I'm a child of an educator. Hi, Mom. And the reality is, like, from a very young age, I was really able to understand that different human beings learn different things different ways. Not everybody learns things the same way. And my mother taught math. And so the reality is, like, certainly people have very struggle with some types of mathematics as opposed to others. They also struggle with the way that you have to learn mathematics, which the way I learned it growing up is very rote, memorization, that kind of thing. There's a number of different approaches. What I would say to come off the back of what Munya and Ron were speaking on, the reality is, I think you're right about the flexibility that you have taking on these kinds of agentic approaches or these AI approaches. You can take it inside of Amazon directly to develop. You can have these kind of capabilities baked into the way you're doing work in GitLab. That is really, really cool. But they lead to one interesting thing, which I think is going to be a significant factor of how we think about AI in the future, which is not just the autonomousness or the ability to automate away the work that we're doing today as human beings. I think there's going to be a lot of that. But a lot of human beings, myself included, learn by watching, right? A lot of human beings, if you think about pair programming, if you think about rubber duck, right? If you think about a brick wall, working with a teammate, just bouncing ideas off of each other. Many people learn by just sort of swimming in, doing something, just sitting alongside someone, watching it happen. Watching this happen, I'm a big vibe coding proponent. I don't think that everyone should vibe code, nor do I think you should put vibe code in production necessarily, right? But what I love about vibe coding and what I love about the process of watching this stuff sort of happen in front of you and you just, spinning the top and watching it go, is I'm learning so much about how software is developed, because it's very cheap and easy for me to watch it happen in real time, right? I think a lot of people in the future, there's going to be a lot more people who are developing code than have developed code in the past, I think. I think the barrier to entry to getting into software development has become a lot easier to get up and running. But we have a serious skills gap right now when it comes to the use of AI in general, the use of these technologies, which organizations suffer with every day. But I think the reality is organizations who are investing in their people are also going to be investing in AI to help support their people. And that is not to replace work. That is to help go through the process of becoming a junior dev to a standard dev, from a standard dev to a senior, from a senior to a principal, taking people on that journey of knowledge that they have in their head as human beings of how code is actually built, how software is actually engineered, how you architect things, so that when these tools come along and they can move quickly for repeatable code, which is what AI really does at its core, for those kinds of things where you're reconstituting these components of how software can be built, you just know a lot more about how to do that stuff, right? We see organizations who are investing in their people get the most out of these kinds of tools. And I think in the future, that's definitely going to be a significant path forward. What I will say, though, is agentic AI is here. And you can see a lot of the announcements from, foundation model builders and, organizations who are talking about, we have gone past, I think Sam Altman said it the other day, that we've gone past the breaking point and now agentic is here. We think he's right. I mean, there's a lot about that that's true. But what I would say is these agentic systems, if they don't have the context of what your organization does, and if they don't have a trusted and secure way to act on behalf of you and on behalf of your organization when taking actions like fixing up a merge request or going off and taking an idea and putting it into the structure of an actual coded merge, branch and stuff like that. Unless you have something you can rely on as an organization, unless you have, the kind of AI you can trust, you're not going to really be able to take full advantage of what these foundation models and what these kind of core capabilities can actually do. So for me, I think humans are about to learn a lot more, which not everybody's talking about in the world of AI right now, but I feel like in the future, that's definitely going to be a thing that's coming. But for sure, agentic AI is something that's here to stay, and organizations need to be taking that approach seriously and understanding how they can make the most out of it in their day-to-day.
Ron, your thoughts?
Thanks, Neil. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think what's really interesting is, if you're looking at this space is moving 1 million miles a second. We innovate and do crazy things every week, even here at AWS, and just our own internal tool adoption with agentic AI. What I think's really important for the audience to hear today too is that the companies that embrace and master agentic AI now are going to have a significant competitive advantage. They're going to be able to deliver software faster, maintain higher quality standards, and respond more quickly to changes. And this is why we emphasize starting with the pilot program. This is not necessarily about improving. I mean, we can improve the individual developer, but this is about software development and its lifecycle overall. And it is here to stay. If you haven't used one of these tools like QDeveloper and GitLab Duo and the integration, it is night and day different. It is going to change how we've reset the bar for kind of entry level, development and programming. These things get you answers quickly, get you, server configurations quickly. And even though it's, evolving rapidly, this is here to improve your overall, developer experience and customer experience. And it's going to end up being a very powerful collaboration between human creativity and AI capability going forward. And I don't think it's really a question of whether or not to adopt these technologies. It's about how quickly you can actually integrate them into your own software development practices and stay ahead of the curve here.
Okay, and Muna, one thing you think we should watch for tomorrow?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the gentleman here have really highlighted the importance of agentic AI. And I think we're really, again, to reiterate, we're heading into a world where AI assistants don't just help, they act, they become more agentic, more autonomous, and more and more basically capable of owning those small tasks end to end. And I think as an individual, you should really leverage it and embrace it fully. And I think, again, as Ron mentioned, organizations that are fully embracing it are the ones seeing the success and the outcomes really early on. And I think for developers and individuals, that means moving from context switching to, I guess, like a cognitive overload to flow. And that would be supported by AI that knows the code base, that knows the backlog, that knows the pipeline, the infrastructure, etc. And I think GitLab Duo with Amazon Q is just that step in that direction. We will be seeing more and more in the future moving towards our direction, and it's really changing the way teams are working and how impactful this is to any organization embracing this change and getting their foot in the door quite early on. Yeah, that's my final thoughts on this.
Well, wow, really interesting conversation. Hope the listeners and the viewers have seen that you could go a million ways here. I think a couple of key points I want to stress here is that what AWS and GitLab have done here is partner together to create a solution set that help address the problems that have been mentioned today. And we at Adaptivist Group are partners of both. We're a platinum partner of GitLab, advanced partner, a DevOps competency partner. We have not sat on our laurels. The DevOps competency is not easy to obtain. We obtained that. But we didn't sit on our laurels. we work tightly with GitLab and AWS to move forward. So today I'll have Neil pass on how you could work with Adaptive's group, AWS and GitLab moving forward, and the next steps we could take. A key point here to mention is that the road to AI is as important as getting to AI, and we understand the people, the process, and the technology. I think what Neil was talking about earlier, the people are so important. No matter how cool the technology gets, no matter how far out it gets, it still comes down to this human connection. So Neil, I'll have you wrap it up, and so thank you everyone again. Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rad. I would say that both GitLab and AWS believe, and we are very happy to be partnering with them because of this. They believe that solution partner approach, being on the ground with customers as they're going through these journeys, being that trusted partner, and literal partner as we're thinking about how organizations sort of meld together to be able to get that movement in the direction that they want to go. Both AWS and GitLab rely on solution partners like us for good reason, especially in this AI landscape. And as Ron mentioned, we couldn't agree more. I mean, this technology is moving incredibly fast. Obviously, the pace of change has been increasing for some time throughout the Industrial Revolution and the revolution sense. But the reality is, like, for this AI approach, you have to be able to work with an organization to start finding those key wins, which requires some help from the outside in many cases. And it's organizations like ours who can go and make sure that we're bridging this gap between GitLab, AWS, and the other tools that people are using in their stack today, and the other approaches that they're doing to developing software, the practices that they operate under, your DevOps approach, your Agile approach, the way you're managing work. We as an organization have that breadth of understanding. We have that breadth of capability to come in and work with customers on the ground operationally and strategically as they're setting out their approaches and their competitive advantages that they're trying to take on and where they're utilizing their tool and their processes to make that real. I would say working with partners like us, you will find that good relationships come out from our work being able to bridge that gap, as I say, but also embedding in an organization that self-learning capability and helping an organization push and propel themselves so they're not reliant on third parties for everything to do what they need to do as an organization. A really good balance is getting an organization up and moving in the place that they need to be and help setting that strategic goals and that strategic path for where they want to be in the future. So I want to say on behalf of Adaptivist and Rad, of course, thank you to everybody. And I just want to say thank you. This conversation with GitLab and AWS is always fun, but this one has been particularly cool. The opportunity to come and talk like this with such intelligent people coming from your different disciplines is just a real blessing. I just want to say thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you all. And that will be a wrap for today. But again, feel free to reach out to us. I look forward to more discussions around this. And Ron, Muna, I can't thank you enough.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rad, Neil. Muna.
Thanks.
It was great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.